This is about who controls these technologies at the fastest pace. Because if you control them, you have more power militarily, you have the potential to control things that are happening in space, you have control over information. So it's about controlling them to trump the other country, right? This is a competition.
Hello and welcome to this week's Tea Break. I'm Al-Enazi, here with my co-host Yuri. This week we're joined by Anna Rosenberg, Head of Geopolitics at the Amundi Investment Institute. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And I've got to start by asking, what tea have you gone for?
You made me drink tea. I would have gone for coffee, but I went for a very classic English breakfast tea, right? Builder's tea.
I've gone for the Indian tea today, Ali, and with very good reason, because there's so much focus on Narendra Modi's visit to China, and India seems to have become public enemy number one now for the US, subject to Trump's bellicose rhetoric, 50% tariffs. We've actually carried a couple of pieces recently about why India is such an interesting economy to invest in, particularly with the technology startups, the thriving cities like Bangalore. But now the friends I speak to in India are getting quite worried about developments. Anna, the family offices that you speak to, how are you advising them to react to this reshaping of the image of India internationally?
It's big power competition playing out. And India has kind of been caught in the middle a little bit. So when you think about those tariffs, clearly they're going to have a hit on the Indian economy. They're going to have a hit on Indian exports, on some manufacturing sectors. We have to take a step back. India has many other reasons why it's been performing pretty strongly over the last few years. It is a geopolitical friend that you want to have because it's an alternative to China. And for China, it's an alternative to the US, right? So I think there's scope for that relationship between the US and India to improve somewhat with time. Because what we have seen over the last few days really playing out is that, India doesn't have to give in to US demands. There are alternative partners. And it has always hedged its relationships geopolitically with Russia, with China going on. So Trump is going to look at this and think, okay, I wanted to increase US power, but essentially I've alienated a potential ally. Modi is going to be in the US most likely towards the end of the month. That could be a window for things to calm down a little bit. But clearly, this great power competition, this rivalry that we're seeing right now doesn't benefit anyone, including India. It's costing everyone money.
And that really begs the question, Anna and Ali, with the technology, the iPhones, can everything really be made in America as President Trump suggests?
Well, we have an interesting piece by Himanshu Tyagi, professor at the Indian Institute of Science and a co-founder of Sentient. He's talking about the AI arms race between the US and China, which he feels is bad for innovation as there is not enough collaboration. Anna, what are your thoughts about the current high-tech rivalry?
This is about who controls these technologies at the fastest pace. Because if you control them, you have more power militarily, you have the potential to control things that are happening in space, you have control over information. So it's about controlling them to trump the other country, right? This is a competition and this is playing out. I completely agree. In theory, more collaboration would be much better for the world. Unfortunately, we are not anymore in this kind of world. We are in a world that has changed. It's not anymore a rules-based international world order. This is about taking the most out for yourself. And this is what we're seeing in the AI tech race. Really, we have two options here. Either eventually this technology democratizes because something breaks through and it's a little bit like the internet and everyone gets access to it, like we saw early when DeepSeek came through, right? Suddenly there was hope that also the Europeans will be able to become players in AI. That's one worldview. The other worldview is that this rivalry continues to play out and whoever breaks through first is going to call the shots, and that is currently playing out between the US and China. So it's very high risk.
And Donald Trump's enemies are not just in the East, in Asia. They're at home in Washington as well, apparently, with his constant attacks against Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve and now trying to throw out Lisa Cook, one of the governors. I mean, there's an element that some of this grandstanding is is really masking what's really going on at the Fed. The switch from combating inflation to the concern about the job numbers. We had a piece from Nigel Green at the De Vere Group looking at this. Anna, these machinations that are going on between the Fed and the White House, what will they mean for the investors you're advising? Can they still rely on that traditional equity bond balance in their portfolios?
So this is another example of Trump trying to maximize power, US power, his personal power, and in a way achieving the opposite. There are, alliances being grouped together against him, in essence reducing his power. The interference of domestic agencies is essentially having the same effect because you're eroding trust in your institutions. And political interference is eroding the biggest asset that the US has, which is its dominance in the financial system and the dollar, right? So you keep on losing faith. Investors are diversifying their dollar holdings, they are diversifying into gold, into other jurisdictions, and that will accelerate.
And Ali, you've just come back from Dubai. Is it any better, the climate there, for the wealthy families than New York or London?
Well, Yuri, from the conversations I've had, there's a common theme that Dubai is emerging as a leading global hub for family offices, driven by a generational shift among Middle Eastern families, investing in AI, private markets and in sustainable ventures. Also there's the attractive tax policies, a strong legal framework and a strategic location which is drawing all these wealthy families from Europe and Asia to relocate or expand their operations. But on the flip side, we also saw the city facing challenges previously during the Great Financial Crisis, where Dubai nearly came to a collapse. And Anna, in the past, most family offices were based in London, New York or Zurich and worked with major banks in those jurisdictions. What are the geopolitical and practical advantages of having a Middle East base in Dubai or Abu Dhabi?
If you think about it right now, we have a lot of political volatility, right? We have it in the US, we have it in Europe, and that is creating a lot of uncertainty. So you could argue that politically, these jurisdictions are a little bit more stable right now, and geopolitically, it makes, again, sense to diversify where you are. In the Gulf, you have closer proximity to other Middle East jurisdictions, to Africa, to some degree to Asia. The geopolitical risk has gone down. The biggest risk to the region was Iran's nuclear capabilities. But Iran has been really weakened through the war, the recent attacks on its nuclear capabilities. But nevertheless, the Middle East is still a hotbed and things could flare up. So, we have to keep in mind that there is a dose of realism here as well that you need.
I was lucky enough to have an old friend, Judge Mark Wolf, who dropped in to see me a couple of weeks ago here at the FT headquarters. And Judge Wolf, he's a bit of a legal legend. After the Watergate scandal in the mid-70s, which brought down President Richard Nixon, and Judge Wolf was he was one of the team tasked with bringing back trust to the US legal system after that. And he investigated the famous Whitey Bulger case in the 90s in Boston, links between organised crime and state and local corruption, and where these gangsters were actually FBI informants at the same time terrorising the local community. And Judge Wolf, he's now trying to set up an international anti-corruption court to help developing nations such as Ukraine rebuild their infrastructure so people can invest there in a transparent way without what he calls the kleptocrats controlling the investments. And I'd like to ask you, Anna, because Trump has already denigrated this court and he's called it an attack on US national sovereignty. And do we need these international institutions to help police these investments into developing countries, or do you think that the market is capable of doing that on its own?
I think clearly this is beneficial, the right thing to do in a world as we knew it up to recently, right? International rules-based, etc. It provides more clarity, transparency, and for an investor that is very important, right? An investor like Amundi would only go somewhere if they're completely certain that everything is compliant. However, we have to go back to the world where we are in right now. We are in a world where the president gets an Airbus present from Qatar and uses it at his primary plane. And we are in a world where the president says, I'm going to decide how these billions are going to be invested. And is this deterring investment into the US? It's not, right? So I think this is an environment where there's huge political change and geopolitical shifts. And this is the time where usually you have huge wealth being formed. Just look at the fall of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the oligarchs. It's an environment that benefits those that have no scruples, right? That just go for it. You should bring your judge back and make sure that he pushes this initiative, because I think clearly it is very much needed. That he'll have to fight hard because there's going to be a lot of opposition in this current global context that we're in.
And I hope that if our guests in the future bring in their favourite teas or a piece of cake, they won't really be breaching any anti-corruption guidelines here at the FT, Ali.
As long as they're not exchanging tea bags for insider tips, then I think we can avoid all compliance issues, Yuri.
I hope so.
Anna Rosenberg, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure.
That wraps up this edition of Tea Break. Don't forget, you can watch all our episodes on the PWM website or the YouTube channel. Got questions or comments? We'd love to hear from you. Head online. See you next week.